How can you save time and effort creating forms in Microsoft Forms? Try a template. Creating a survey or a form using a template helps you to save time, be consistent, and make it simple to share the form with others. To start, log into your Microsoft 365 account and then launch Forms from the Microsoft 365 app launcher. Or from your browser, go to forms.microsoft.com. This video is part of a series on Microsoft Forms. To learn how to get started with Microsoft Forms, click the link above or look in the description below for links to the videos in the series. From Forms, you'll find templates in the Explore Templates area. On the right, pick View All. Notice how these templates are organized by trending, as well as multiple categories such as events, employee surveys, and other digital forms. These options may change over time. From here, I'll pick Post-Event Feedback Survey. Let's review some of these questions. To learn more about different question options, look for my link in the description on creating multiple part forms. With a template, you might have most of the work done for you, which is fantastic. Here are the common questions that might be part of a post-event feedback survey. How satisfied are you with the event? An image has been added to this. Is this your first time attending? Here we have a Likert scale where we can rate various elements of that particular event, and we can continue as well. Here's a question type called a Net Promoter Score, which allows you to really pick from a scale of different options, various choices, a text, and then some questions that have text fields. Additionally, as we saw in some of our other videos, here are some suggestions or recommendations that are AI generated based upon the content or type of survey. The field type is shown over on the right-hand side. So any of these could be added as well to this survey. But the nice thing about it is most of the work is done. Here you can add various questions, so you can get the feedback that's helpful for you, and then of course customize the way it looks. Let's make a little bit of a modification to one of our questions first. I'd like to add one more item to this question. So simply click into it and notice as well that we have flexibility of modifying what some of these answers are, but those are also can be edited individually. I'll add another statement. I'd like to also learn and get feedback about the meeting space. And all I have to do is click away. For question 5, I'd like to move it below the next question. Simply drag it. It's really easy. You can see the reference here in terms of where that might be. In fact, I think I'll put it down here because I want to collect the information about the event first before I ask them how likely they are to recommend this kind of event. Let's edit this title so it's a little bit friendlier and more specific. Edit the subtitle as necessary. And let's go to style. I think I'd like a little different look for this survey. So let's pick this one. This looks like a better match for a team building event. From here, you may want to pick settings to explore exactly who's allowed to respond to this. I want to record their name and only limit it to one response per person. You might want to set a start and an end date for this. Customize your thank you message. I'll allow respondents to edit their responses, and that looks good. So we'll click away from this. And now let's collect responses. Here I'll create an invitation. And the nice thing about this here is like sales and marketing for this. And I can embed the cover. So that's part of the look and feel of this survey. It will go to my sales and marketing team with this visual. Go ahead and send it on its way. We've set it up to send me notification messages as each individual completes it. We'll close it. And now let's go back to Forms. Here I'll refresh, go back to my main list, and here is my form waiting for those responses. Now, as you're working with forms, if you don't currently need templates and want to focus on your other forms, notice this option in the upper right here to hide templates. And of course, it's easy to bring that back by exploring templates. How will you use these form templates to help you save time creating surveys and forms? To learn more ways to be productive with Microsoft Forms or to join my free tips newsletter, visit thesoftwarepro.com forms. If this training was helpful, please subscribe to this channel for other time-saving software tips. Thanks for watching.